So my first Pentacle production was in 1975. But before that, I had seen a couple of shows at Pinnacle. My high school drama teacher took several of her ex-students to see a show at Pinnacle. There were three of us who all went to OCE at the time. And so we all made a little field trip. And I think it was the very first time I had ever seen live theater outside of like a school setting. I had done a couple of shows in high school, but I had never had an opportunity to see anything on a different stage. So I'm not quite sure what I thought I was going to find when I went there. And I remember as we pulled into the driveway, and at that time it truly was a driveway with weeds and mud puddles, and it became an adventure and continued to be an adventure over the years just to get up the driveway in order to get to the theater, thinking, okay, we must be lost because there cannot possibly be anything out here that we would ever be able to watch theater in. And as you get close to the theater, you see it there nestled, of course, in the woods. And so I thought, okay, this is very unusual, very interesting. Certainly not the theater that I was expecting to see when I first heard about Pinnacle from my drama teacher. Walking down the path, then going in, you're of course entranced by the fact of this beautiful structure out in the middle of the woods. It's this kind of pastoral setting where you wouldn't expect to find art. Going inside, I had another shock, which was basically, where's the curtain? Where's the stage? Where's the proscenium? Because the first show I saw was being done in the round. The show was The Lady from Maxime's, which was a show I was entirely unfamiliar with. So I had no expectations of what the show would be like. It was directed by Louise Larsen, who I discovered was a true icon of the theater and certainly one of our most creative, innovative directors, certainly in my experience of working there. And so, the lights come up and suddenly these actors are coming up from all around onto the stage. And I had never, ever experienced anything even close to being similar like that. So I was fascinated. I was blown away just by the exuberance of the cast. It was so high energy. I think Louise actually was visible in the audience, and you could actually tell that she was the director because she had worked in, I think, some moments where she like either blew a whistle or conducted or did something. The set changes, as you can imagine, with something in the round that has multiple sets, all were very visible to the audience. So you had cast members and crew members rushing in with different pieces, but it was also carefully choreographed and orchestrated. It was just an amazing, amazing experience. And I fell in love with the place. And I think seeing something in the round definitely had a very profound influence on me and what I hoped I could do in the future, which was A, work in that kind of a structure, and B, I think even then I probably had dreams that someday I might get to be able to direct, and it definitely had an impact on that. My very first show was the Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams classic. I was still going to college. I'm not sure why. My best friend from high school and college roommate, Mark Wood, and I decided kind of as a wild idea, hey, let's go audition for a Pentacle show. The audition was at one of the churches downtown. I don't remember a lot about that particular audition. I think we had to prepare something ahead of time. I was very nervous. I think Mark accuses me now of backing into something as we were either arriving or departing. So I'm sure my nervousness was manifesting it in poor driving skills. But we both auditioned. I don't even remember reading with anybody. It may have been one of those auditions where you just did a prepared piece and the director called you later. I was not initially cast in the role of the gentleman caller, which was the role I eventually played, and Mark was not originally cast, but through the miracle of schedules, we were given the good news of being offered the roles. It was a great experience. We had a fairly bizarre director. He it was just a little bit unusual in terms of his style. I can remember one of the joys of the production was actually working with Holman Schmidt, who was Pat Holman at the time. She's another one of those icons of the theater. And I got started, I guess, early enough in Pentacle that I got to work with several people who became kind of heroes to me. And Pat was certainly one of them. She played Amanda in the show. And Lorelei Gilmore, Ulmer at the time, played Laura. And so I was the gentleman caller with her. And there's a big scene with the gentleman caller and Laura, and they dance a little bit, and he actually kisses her. And kisses are never a comfortable thing, particularly when you're young and you're not all that comfortable, maybe with, you don't know the person well that you're having this love scene with. Not that Lorelei didn't make it very easy, because she was a great person to work with, but the director wanted the kiss held for a certain amount of time. And so as we're rehearsing it, he liked to count things off in beats. So we go into the kiss, and in the background, we can hear him, and kind of out of the corner of our eyes, see him going 1, 2, 3. And we both started laughing and broke the kiss. He says, no, you can't break the kiss until the count of 5. So we go into the kiss again, and eventually we got the 5 count right, and we were able to move on. So that's one of my memories from that particular show. In those days, we didn't have season tickets, and so every show kind of just sold individual tickets to people who chose to come. I'm not sure why the classic nature of the Glass Menagerie wouldn't get a great audience, but on one particular night, the director came down and said, well, you outnumber the audience tonight. Do you still want to do the show? Well, there were only 4 of us in the cast. So that meant there was either 2 or 3 people in the audience. I hope that wasn't one person sitting alone. It was in the round. So that also, we went ahead and did the show, but you kind of don't know where to turn, because of course you're moving so that you give the best possible view to all sides. Well, there's only 2 people sitting on one side. So it was a fun experience. Obviously doing the show was a pleasure to us, and you have an audience, so hey, perform. In terms of the number of shows I've acted in, it's somewhere in the mid-60s, I think. Like I said, I started in 75, and I was gung-ho and wanted to audition for everything I possibly could. So I did a lot in the early years, and I was doing multiple shows a year. And even after I graduated from college, I got a job at Central High School, very close by. And so if I weren't already involved in doing some sort of a show at school, then I did something at Pentacle. So 60 some in terms of acting in them. I've probably been involved in another, I don't know, 20 or 30 in some sort of capacity. I've directed, I've assistant directed. I've been an artistic consultant. I've been a sound engineer up in the booth. I've done lights. I kind of set it as a goal to kind of fill every possible role in a production capacity. And I still have not, I don't think, ever stage managed a show. So that's on my bucket list. I'll have to do some stage managing at some point. And I would love to actually do lights for a show again. When I did lights before, we had a patch panel and everything was done manually. And I did a show called The Cemetery Club where I did lights for a director, Randy Bowser, who put lots of light cues in that particular show, but later on he directed Hair. And Nancy Moen, whom you've talked with, had been the sound or the light person for that show. But they added an extra show because it sold so well that they needed somebody to fill in on lights because the whole cast was willing to add a performance, but Nancy just couldn't be there. And actually, I think they may have actually added 2 performances. So Randy thought, okay, Ken did a great job on Cemetery Club. Let's have him do Hair. Well, I mean, there were things happening in the middle with I'm patching over here and I'm clicking circuits over there. And it was the most incredible, challenging experience I've ever had. And also one of the most nerve-wracking because just to fill in for a couple of nights on a show that had 100+ manual cues was craziness. But I somehow survived. I didn't ruin the show, although I think it went dark at one particular point where it probably shouldn't have. But the audience didn't notice because there was so much craziness happening in the show, which was, did I mention it was Hair? The musical Hair. So I think the audience just thought it was part of the show, the sudden blackout in the middle of one of the scenes. Asking an actor or a director like what their favorite show was, especially if there are quite a few of them, is like asking which one is your favorite child, because they all have, of course, a special place in your heart. And there's going to be something very special about each and every one of them, even the ones that may not have been the most positive or the greatest of experiences. There's still something you take away from them and remember about them fondly. So, but yes, of course, there are shows that bring back particularly warm memories. The show that I always think back on with probably the greatest fondness would be Godspell. And I know you've talked to several other people that were in productions of Godspell. Robert Sahlberg made reference, I think, when you interviewed him. Godspell is one of those shows that, because of the nature of the show, because depending upon who's directing it, the kind of cooperative nature where everybody works together, the cast with the directors to kind of create the show and what happens within the show, you end up with this incredible bond and a very tight cast. I'm not probably the most spiritual person in the world, but I think the message of the show also makes it particularly special. It was directed by Sherry and Tom Ulmer. They always had kind of a family atmosphere in their shows. And the cast just became so bonded that there was a lot of tears at the end of every show, every night, and a great deal, particularly at the end of the run. So much so that we had an opportunity to do a benefit run of it like a year later for another week in Pentacle space after the regular Pentacle season was over. So everybody came back except for one person who had moved away. Sherry jumped into that role. And so we got to do it all over again. Maybe by the second time we were ready for it to be over, but the ending of the first time was one of the most devastating but yet wonderful experiences I think I've ever had at Pentacle. So that was a big one. In terms of some other really important ones to me, probably the show that meant the most in terms of I really, really, really want this part was the first time Pentacle did Into the Woods. Again, a Tom Ulmer directed show. I desperately wanted to play the part of the baker. It was a huge turnout at the auditions. It was one of those very competitive kind of auditions where lots of people, lots of choices. And it was just this wonderful experience of being cast, first of all, and then the process of putting the show was particularly wonderful. And again, I got to work with people that I knew as friends and had worked with before, and then a lot of new folks that I thought were just amazing. I think that was, well, wasn't Jeff Witt's very first show, but he played Jack. He was wonderful. Anita Davis played his mom. Deborah Johansson was the witch. Dobie Long played Cinderella. Ed Shopes was the narrator. Susan Shopes was one of the stepsisters. And I'm leaving some people out. Louisa was Little Red Riding Hood. Aaron Fawcett was one of the princes. Don Williamson. I'm saying a bunch of names that may not mean things to people, but if you saw much at Pinnacle, that really was a stellar cast and a wonderful experience, a great show. It was important to me on a lot of levels. I took a break from Pinnacle for a period of time. I'd moved up closer to Portland, done a couple of shows at a couple of other theaters. And so the show that I came back with, where I got involved with Pinnacle again, was Sordid Lives, directed by Heather Toller. Again, it was a movie that I had loved. There was a part in it that I desperately wanted to play, Brother Boy. So it was the first time I had auditioned in Pinnacle in like 5 years. Again, it meant a lot to me. I got cast in the show. Wonderful cast. It was a great experience. So just getting brought back or coming back, it was special. I'm glad you asked that question because I can speak directly to some directors out there who may be looking for projects to do in the future. I've done actually 2 of the shows that I would put on my bucket list. I've done great experiences, and they were both actually directed by Joe Dodge. Man of La Mancha and playing Don Quixote in that was incredibly challenging, but it is one of those kind of dream roles where you get to sing the dream song, which is the impossible dream, which Joe, I think, calls the impossible song, because it is a bit of a challenge to sing. And everybody has, I think, high expectations of, okay, what's that song going to be like? And they look forward to hearing it sung. That was a great experience. David Cristobal played Sancho, and Dick Bond was the barber. Jane Evans was Aldonza. So that was a good experience and a bucket list role. And then the other one that occurs to me, I had seen Equus the first time Pinnacle did it with Wayne Valentine, again, a hero of mine. Mm-hmm. He did lots of Pinnacle shows and then did things in Ashland and was quite well respected, an incredibly talented actor, director. My friend Jerry Camp played the young boy in it. So when Joe was going to direct a version of Equus, I was there at auditions and was able to play Dr. Dysart. And in the middle of the production, I had gone to the Y to play volleyball during my lunch and dove for a ball. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm not particularly athletic. And I felt something snap as I went down, and it turns out that I tore my Achilles tendon. And fortunately, it was an off night that night. We didn't have a production scheduled, so I went to the urgent care room. They eventually did x-rays, and indeed, I had ruptured my Achilles tendon. So I was placed in a boot, and I had to do the rest of the run of the show in this pretty major character who has monologue after monologue, never leaves the stage, and actually participated in some of the set changes, pretty much just moving a chair around. So it wasn't anything too difficult. I met Joe out at the theater after I broke the news to her that I had indeed ruptured my Achilles and that I was going to be on at least 1, if not 2 crutches. So I did figure out how to kind of get through the pain and move the chair around. We reblocked certain things. I was supposed to lift the person playing the young man, who was incredible, by the way. So we had to kind of work our way around that. It was a challenge to get through that show, but a lot of people thought that that we had made that decision to go ahead and just do it with the crutch because it showed how wounded the psychiatrist character was. And so it kind of fit, it kind of worked. And by closing night, I asked my doctor, because I had scheduled surgery to have the rupture fixed for after the show had closed, because I would have been in greater pain for post-surgery than I was before I had the surgery, because the rupture had already happened. I said, would it be possible for me to go ahead and do this one scene where I lift the other character? And he said, well, if you think you can do it, it's not going to hurt you any worse than you're hurt now. So go ahead and give it a try. Well, I didn't tell Joe that on closing night, I was going to go ahead and try to give her this moment back of lifting the other character and carrying him over and setting him down. And so it was kind of a special moment in that way. And I felt so badly that I had messed up her production by rupturing my Achilles tendon, that I felt I owed her at least one opportunity to see that moment that she had directed so beautifully.